Hello, mindful friends. Today we are going to be talking about courage in the face of adversity and when things fall apart in our lives or aren't going the way that we hoped that they would. And that courage does not mean we don't admit that it's difficult. It doesn't mean that we never look at or address or sit with the fact that things hurt, that they're hard, that we're scared, that we're vulnerable. That courage actually means that we're strong enough to admit that things are hard. We're strong enough to be with our vulnerabilities. And I would say one of the best teachers on this is Brené Brown with her book on vulnerability. And she talks about how you never have a moment of courage without the presence of vulnerability. That if we don't feel vulnerable, there's no need for courage. Courage is not present, it's not there. And that when she was interviewing people and speaking with people who were in the military, very strong athletes, large public figures who have to do big speeches, and when she asked them, are you okay with vulnerability? And many of them said no. But then she asked, name a time in your life that required courage where vulnerability was not present. And none of them could name a time. That any time courage is present, that we're feeling it, we're calling upon it to guide us forward and support us. Anytime that courage is there, vulnerability is there too. And it actually makes us even stronger and even bigger and more capable if we're able to admit the vulnerability and to really say, I'm hurting or this is difficult. And so in those times in our lives when things fall apart, where we're suffering, we're struggling, something happened that we did not expect or we're not all that okay with, courage comes in when we're able to be still with it, stay present with it, and admit this is hard, this is difficult, this takes a lot of courage. And when we do that, we're avoiding those coping techniques, the runaway techniques, the avoid techniques, distracting ourselves, which are all set in denial. It's not that hard. I just keep moving. I consume mind-altering substances to stay okay, to not have to look. This is weakness. The ways that we try to avoid so that we can keep on that smiley face, so that we don't admit that it's hard, that these are actually weakness because we can't sit with. And they end up creating more destruction within us. They actually, it may appear that they're making the time easier because you're avoiding being with the pain, but they actually add on to your suffering. They make it last longer. And when it's unexpressed and unacknowledged, it settles within us in other ways, in other injuries, within our hearts. It becomes a part of us and lasts longer than if we have the courage to sit with and to admit. And that this is a part of our gain and our growth of the experience, is when we really have the courage to sit with, to be present with. That's where the learning happens. And every time that we admit, ooh, this is my tight spot, this is really hard for me, this I struggle with, every time we can look at that, say it out loud, ask for support with it, reach out, our own resources, dig deep. That's where the healing happens. And when we say, healing and transformation come from those moments of difficulty, this is what we mean, is that in that moment, when you have the courage to be with and to admit difficulty, and then to see, it points to the weakness, it points to the place within us that can't stay grounded in a hard situation, that therein lies our opportunity for growth. And so, I was just working with a client who went through really hard medical trauma, and we were talking about this and how each moment, if we deny this is hard, and they were talking about the need for support. It is hard that I need support. It's hard for me to ask for support. I wish I could just turn away, put on my stone wall, carry it all myself. And this situation is so bad that I cannot. I cannot do my habit energy of carrying everything alone and not asking for help. The courage to admit vulnerability and to ask for help, that is the growth edge. And that is what's going to help them to emerge from this experience stronger, bigger, more spiritual. Because a spiritual person can ask for help. They know that receiving and being a part of that cyclical, circle of giving, receiving is what makes us stronger, and what makes others stronger, and what makes the collective stronger. And so the hard experience of a medical trauma and the ability to be with the vulnerability and admit this is hard is what allowed them to see the tight spot around asking for help and allowed them to grow through it. So that is what we mean by having courage in times of suffering, in times of pain, in times of tragedy. Courage means to be with and to notice what is vulnerable here, what is hard here. And then the courage to do that brings up, shines a light on what it is that needs growth within us. And then when we hit that growth edge is where the healing starts, through the destruction, through the pain, through the suffering. But you have to get to the point where you're courageous enough to be present when things fall apart, and courageous enough to admit what's hard. Because then in the seeking of healing through that, in the seeking of remedying those tight spots, is where the big expansion happens within us. And we move closer to our spiritual selves. And we work past those blocks that keep us small and limited. So I invite you this week to have the courage to be with what is hard in your life. And as you're being with, noticing, where's my vulnerability here? And in admitting it, then going through the healing of that towards your expansion. If you like these little talks and would like to join us for a group session or individual coaching, please visit us at newleafmindfulness.com. I hope to see you all very soon.